So Dr. Robert Redfield, the former CDC director, is speaking out for the first time, saying publicly where he believes the coronavirus that caused the pandemic came from. These extraordinary comments come in a new interview for a CNN documentary airing this weekend. Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now. And Sanjay, Dr. Redfield says he's giving his opinion, but I have to say, I think you're about to break some pretty significant news here.
Yeah, I mean, this was extraordinary, John, for certain. He is the former CDC director. He has spent his entire career as a virologist. I interviewed all 6 of these doctors sort of in the form of an autopsy, really to sort of meticulously dissect exactly what had happened here. Really no pre-agenda. Dr. Redfield, when we sat down to talk, he wanted to start at the beginning, the origins of this virus, what he believed actually transpired. Take a listen.
If I was to guess, this virus started transmitting somewhere in September, October in Wuhan.
September, October.
That's my own view. It's an only opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions now. You know, I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. Other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
It is also not unusual for that type of research to be occurring in Wuhan. The city is a widely known center for viral studies in China, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has experimented extensively with bat coronaviruses.
It is a remarkable conversation I feel like we're having here, because you are the former CDC director and you were the director at the time this was all happening.
For the first time, the former CDC director is stating publicly that he believes this pandemic started months earlier than we knew, and that it originated not at a wet market, but inside a lab in China.
These are 2 significant things to say, Dr. Redfield.
And that's not implying any intentionality. You know, it's my opinion, right? But I am a virologist. I have spent my life in virology. I do not believe this somehow came from a bat to a human, and at that moment in time, the virus that came to the human became one of the most infectious viruses that we know in humanity for human-to-human transmission. Normally when a pathogen goes from a zoonotic to human, it takes a while for it to figure out how to become more and more efficient in human-to-human transmission. I just don't think this makes biological sense.
So in the lab, do you think that process of becoming more efficient was happening? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, let's just say I have coronavirus that I'm working on. Most of us in the lab, we're trying to grow a virus. We try to help make it grow better and better and better and better and better and better so we can do experiments and figure out about it. That's the way I put it together.
It's a pretty extraordinary conversation and a little glimpse of what we revealed sort of within these couple of hours. I should point out the World Health Organization calls the lab leak theory unlikely, and Chinese officials have started increasingly pointing to a multiple origin theory, saying that this pandemic may have started in multiple places, even around the world, including U.S. military labs. That's unsubstantiated, but that's sort of the back and forth that's happening right now. We still don't know, a year later, exactly how this pandemic started.
Sanjay, he's the former CDC director. So when he says it's just his opinion, it's not just an opinion. The former CDC director sees things and knows things that the rest of us don't
lifelong of expertise.
Or know. Well, but not only his lifelong area of expertise, but actually when he was in the U.S. government, seeing things that the rest of us aren't entitled to. I mean, how much of just an opinion can it be?
That's exactly right. I mean, he's talking to people on the ground, not just his counterparts at the China CDC, but we have investigators on the ground in various countries around the world, including China. If you look even at our preparedness and response sort of strategies in the United States, it's medical and public health, but it's also intelligence gathering. So when we're sitting down and talking to all these people, we're getting a sort of overall picture, I think, for the first time of what they knew at what time, and how they were sort of piecing that together. So it's not just intrigue. I mean, it's important to know how this started if you're going to best prepare for a possible future pandemic. To go and so it's sort of from an animal to a human and suddenly become one of the most infectious pathogens we've ever seen in humanity simply doesn't happen very often. That's the point that Dr. Redfield was trying to make.
Sanjay Gupta, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And it does sound like something we need to discuss more. So let's do that right now, John. Let's bring in CNN political analyst Josh Rogin. He's done a lot of reporting on the origin of COVID-19. He's the author of the new book, Chaos Under Heaven, America, China, and the Battle for the 21st Century. Josh, you have done reporting on the origins. We've had these discussions with you. Tell us the significance of hearing Dr. Redfield, former director, say this, that that's what he thinks it came from a lab.
You know, my initial reaction, Allison, is wow, stunning. Groundbreaking, really narrative-changing conversation that Sanjay Gupta had with Robert Redfield for a couple of really important reasons. One is, as you mentioned, he is not any Joe Schmo scientist. He was the head of the CDC, a lifelong virologist, in a position to know all this information. And he's making two very shocking allegations. One is that the virus started in September or October, according to his opinion, which implies that the Chinese government hid it for several months. And two, that he believes, not just based on, supposition, but based on the way that the virus emerged and his professional analysis of the way it acted, that it was too strong and too advanced to have come from nature. And he's referring to the gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, that matches the information that came out of the Trump administration and was confirmed by the Biden administration to some degree when they came in and checked the U.S. intelligence work. So it's not just Robert Redfield's opinion. There's a growing body of evidence that points to this lab accident theory. And while we don't know what happened, we can't say we know what happened. What this does is it makes it very, very important that there's more investigation and that we regard the ongoing investigation, frankly, by the WHO and the Chinese scientists as not the end of the inquiry here, because, as you noted, they're poo-pooing this theory already.
Again, Redfield says it's just his opinion, but he's not just any guy or any Joe Schmo, as you said. Don't we, at this point, need to see the evidence? Don't we need to see how this opinion of his and then the claims made by the Trump administration and verified to an extent by the Biden administration? We need to see the evidence of all this.
Of course, and that we need to see the evidence both on the Chinese side and on the U.S. side, because, Robert Redfield, remember, when he was CDC director, he was not, treated well by the Trump administration. He has no incentive, no motivation to bail them out or to support their theory for their sake. He's doing this because this is what he really believes, and it's based on what he saw when he was inside the government. So the easiest thing to do is for the Biden administration is to release publicly the intelligence that they have, but the only real way to crack this is for the Chinese government to hand over the data of the early cases, all of the things that were in the lab. Now, what they say is that, oh, well, the lab didn't have the virus, so that's that. But what Robert Redfield is saying is that we can't take that at face value. So we're going to need an independent investigation and a lot more transparency on the Chinese side. But the Biden administration can also be more transparent as well.
But even if there's an independent investigation, would China be inclined to hand over whatever documentation they have about what they were doing in the lab, number one? And number two, why doesn't the WHO seem to be on the same page with Dr. Redfield?
Right. Well, on your first question, the Chinese government has had over a year to hand over that data, and they've done quite the opposite. They've hid the data. There are allegations that they've manipulated the data. They jailed the journalists. They silenced the scientists. So that's a pattern of obfuscation and cover-up that's pretty much undeniable at this point. So that's a problem that I don't think that we're going to be able to solve. And that's really unfortunate. And the WHO team, which I'm sure is full of a lot of well-meaning people, simply doesn't have the access that they need. And some of the members of the WHO investigative team have conflicts of interest. And as their statements so far show that, they're not really looking into the lab accident theory at all because they don't believe it to be true. They don't want it to be true. Suffice to say that we shouldn't ignore the WHO investigation, but it's not going to be the end-all, be-all of what we know. It just can't be because, as you just heard, the head of the CDC during the time of the outbreak says that the WHO investigation is on the wrong track.
Josh Rogin, so good to get your reporting and expertise into this.
Can't wait for the special.
Well,
it's going to be an amazing special.
Thank you very much, Josh. Don't miss this unprecedented event. with Dr. Sanjay Gupta when the medical leaders of the war on COVID break their silence. You can watch the CNN special, COVID War, the Pandemic Doctors Speak Out. It airs this Sunday at 9 p.m. only on CNN.